All right, so product analytics and metrics is the first section that we'll be talking through. And generally speaking, there's the way that it's been laid out here is that there are three key pillars you should think about when answering these questions. First is that they should be comprehensive. So the point here is that you should be laying out pros and cons for your desired approach. No matter what the question is, right? The first thing you should be asking, and actually like this comes before any of these three pillars, is asking questions. It's something that I brought up in the past, but asking questions is like, if you don't ask a question, you're already off to a bad start. And I'll tell you why. The asking questions give you two things. First, it gives you actually more context. So if there's any information that's being left on the table, either on purpose or not on purpose, you're leaving it on the table if you don't ask the question. And you're also like potentially going in the wrong direction. So it's just making sure that you are going in the right direction, and it's also giving you more information potentially. And the second is it buys you time, right? When you repeat a question or when you repeat something and you ask them back, is this exactly what it is, or is there anything else I should know about? You're like literally buying yourself another 40 seconds to lay out your thoughts in your head. So with that said, I'll go back to the first point here, comprehensive. So once you've asked the questions, immediately your mind should be thinking about like, okay, how do I answer this, right? And you're like, hopefully you have two or maybe even three ways that you're brainstorming. It's fine if you have one way. Most people only like think through one approach, and that's okay, right? Like you can just lay it out and you can comment on the strengths and weaknesses. But the best thing to do really is like, if you have two or three, just lay them all out on the table. And comment on like, this is better than that, this is better than that, and just kind of get it out of the way, and then move very, very quickly to the approach that you think is the best. And then you can kind of execute from there. So lay out the pros and cons for your approach no matter what. Two is being very specific. So basically this is saying, just don't be vague in let's say like crafting a metric is your goal, right? If they say like, oh, how would you evaluate the success of X, Y, and Z, right? Instead of saying, oh, I think we should see how users behave, how they like and comment on Instagram pictures, be like as specific as possible in a way that someone could just take what you said and write a SQL query to mimic that, right? So in this example, it would be like, I want to measure average likes per user per day, right, for this particular segment in this particular time frame. Like that would be as specific as possible. And then lastly, this is more of an artistic side than it is really like than it is necessary, but it's nice to focus on the company goals, right? And like you can do this a million times and have a similar framework of which you approach. You're already thinking about, okay, what are different metrics to move X, Y, and Z. But it's always good to like bring in the context of whatever company that you're either talking to, interviewing with, or the company that they're actually like giving you as an example. So it's totally possible that if you're interviewing for Uber, they might give you an Airbnb example, right? Or if you're like, they might just randomly say, oh, let's imagine you're a consumer goods company. So immediately put on that hat and bring in the company goals. And I think this is interesting. I want to talk about this for one quick second. I actually like to think about it as like a hierarchy of goals. It will probably be more relevant in like a take-home exam when you have more time to discuss and like talk through your thought process of like why I think this goal, this metric is better than the other, and you can talk about objectives and stuff. But I think it still doesn't hurt to at least comment on it very briefly at the very beginning. And what I mean by the hierarchy of goals is, so in any environment, right? Like when you're actually on the job, you're probably going to run a test to like, right? Any of these things, a lot of them have to do with like either running an A/B test or just, looking at a metric and seeing how that evolves over time or whatever it is. Oftentimes that is going to be pinned to a product, right? A specific product or a specific hypothesis or a product area, or like, a department within a company, right? And that particular product area will have its own goals. Those goals might differ from your larger department, and those goals might differ from the overall company, right? And so it's naive to think that the goals at the company level and the department level and your product area levels are all going to be exactly aligned. So I think it's helpful to always comment on it. And I'll give you a quick example. Like, I'll give you an example at Spotify, the company I work with now. So the company as a whole, the mission, and this is even better. Like if you actually go ahead and just research the mission of your company, you can just go on their careers page or their culture page, whatever, just like research that, right? The mission of Spotify, it's changed a couple of times, but like it's roughly speaking to empower like 100 million creators and artists to do what they love the most, right? And so if I take that like abstract qualitative statement and I try to make like pin that to like some sort of quantitative thing, to empower 100 million creators to do what they love and to share their creation with the world. Okay, well, immediately there's scale, right? They talk about 100 million. So I want to be able to expand my number of creators. That's like probably one thing in the back of my head. Secondly, to do what they love. Okay, what is an indication of doing what they love? Maybe retention is high, stickiness is high, frequency is high, engagement per session, the number of tracks that they upload, whatever it is, right? Like those are some things I'm thinking about. So that is something that you quickly comment on to the highest level. But what if the product that I'm, the role that I'm interviewing for, or the product that I'm actually being asked about in this interview is about the ads business, is saying like, okay, well, cool, that's our goal, company goal. But, you know, I'm curious about testing the, let's say the question is like, oh, I want to know the impact, know the ideal ad load I should be doing in the podcast side of the business. Okay, that's interesting. The podcast side of the business. So, so then if we're talking about ads, right? One thing you should be thinking about is probably revenue, right? We didn't even talk about revenue when we talked about Spotify's overall mission and all that, right? Like growing size of creators and retention and stickiness and all that. But when we talk about ads, okay, well, let's talk about revenue and let's talk about filling inventory, right? Percentage of inventory filled. But then these have nothing to do with what we just talked about. So is there a way that we can identify metrics that's relevant to the ads business and inventory and all that, that's also relevant to the company goal? Well, let's think. Maybe we could think about something like I honestly couldn't think of a one on the spot, but it might be like a ratio of revenue per engaged user, right? So like, at least you're taking in revenue as one piece, and then you're taking the engagedness of the user from the overall company mission as a second piece. You know, that could work. And then they might drill you down and say like, okay, that's, you know, that seems fair to me. And honestly, like they're not going to like poke too many holes, as long as you can show that you're shifting gears and putting on different hats, and are empathetic to like both the product area and the company. That should at least get you past the minimum passing bar. Any questions on this first section here?